Oh, wow, we're already got people on. Awesome. I was wondering if people were actually going to be on because the time change and everything. So I'm really glad that people are able to still join us this morning. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We had a lot of people join this group over the last few weeks that we've been talking about the event. So we're super glad that we have a whole bunch of new people in the group who want to learn more about what Dr. Thompson has to teach you about raising healthy children and having a healthy family to yourself. So we just wanted to let you know that you can ask questions throughout the whole thing in the comments. We will be having a time at the end to go through the questions that you guys have and answering any of the questions. We've gotten a lot. Good morning, Lexi. We've gotten a lot of questions already, so we're super excited to be able to answer all your guys' things. So because we have a lot of new people, I wanted to just introduce Dr. Thompson to you guys because a lot of you guys probably don't know him. Dr. Thompson is a chiropractor and a Wellness Way practitioner and has been on a health journey for 15 plus years. And he is excited to share what he has learned with you guys about raising his own three happy, healthy children. So let's go ahead and get started, Dr. Thompson. Before I do, I did want to mention on the screen, you guys will see, write this down. If you have any questions that you can't comment, just send them via email or give us a text to that number as well. So there's lots of ways you guys can ask your questions. So hi, Thermanda. All right, Dr. Thompson, I'm going to pass it on over to you.
All right. Thank you, Chloe. All right. So, hey, guys. Thanks for joining us on Saturday morning. So, again, if you have any kind of questions or anything, just write them in the comments below, and we'll have a little bit of time at the end to be able to answer some of the questions that you might have. And so I want to make sure if you guys can hear okay, just go ahead and give us a thumbs up. Make sure that the sound is good, and then make sure that you can actually see the screen. All right, awesome. All right, so hey, make sure, guys, that you write down the info at exemplifyhealth.com and also this number, because at the end, I'm going to show you what you need to do specifically for your kids. And so make sure when you write this down so that you can email us or call us, we're going to have an offer, especially for you as parents, especially for either yourself or for your kids. So make sure that you write down that number. So I know that if you're on today, you probably might need some help as a parent. And here's the thing, we all need help as parents. It's really hard to navigate a journey alone when it comes to raising healthy kids and things like that. And I'll be the first one to actually say that I have needed help from other people. However, that once you start to understand principles, once you start to understand laws, once you start to understand rules, and once you start to understand the big idea, it becomes a lot easier for you to navigate your health decision, especially when it comes to kids. So why are we doing a talk within Exemplify Healthy Families about building healthy kids? Well, it's for a couple of reasons. Number one, I always say it's easier to build healthy kids than to repair broken adults. And in our office, far too long are we seeing adults that we have to try to fix and do a lot of different things in order to help fix them. But when we ask them really and dig really deep when it comes to their history, we actually see that a lot of these things started off in childhood. And those people were just medicated, and they are seeing a consequence of just not doing the right things all the way from birth, all the way until they become adults. So it's so much easier to build healthy kids than it is to try to repair broken adults. So one of my passions is what can we do to start not have to fix broken adults, but to bring up healthy kids. So I don't envy moms. I don't, especially those who have kids today, because my kids are 12 and they're 10 and they're 8. And even the landscape of healthcare in the last 8 years has changed so much that if you're a new parent, God bless you. I mean, you have even a more difficult journey than what I had as parents and raising newborns and things like that. So we want to help you to navigate this. So we don't want you to have to do it alone. We want to help you navigate this whole landscape of, healthcare today. And I know when I get done, you're going to want help, especially if your child hasn't gotten any help by us or by our office. And so don't worry, at the end, we'll be able to offer help. We'll give you some direction as far as what you need to do in order to start raising a healthy family. And that means a child who is not on medications, who doesn't have a chronic health condition, who is well adapted mentally, physically, and socially as well. So before I start, though, I want to give you guys a disclaimer, because I remember I did a talk 15 years ago. So I was newly into practice, and I went into a mom's group of about 50 different moms, and I went in guns a-blazing, and it didn't go very well because I remember actually halfway through the talk, a mom literally yelled out halfway through. She said, "I'd like to see you do this to your kids. I'd like everything that you're telling me to do when you have kids. I'd like to see you try to do all of these different things you're recommending." But 15 years later, I have done it. And my kids at 12 and 10 and 8, here's the great thing. They've never been on a drug. They've never been on medication. They've never been on antibiotics. Doesn't mean that they've never ever been sick. However, we have done those things, and because it's a priority for us and it's not impossible. However, that woman, she actually felt attacked because her kids were sick all of the time, and she got really emotional about it. So I know that if you're a mom, you're a dad, you're on here right now, I know that you love your children. That's a given. That's a fact. And I know that you want to do everything you can in your power in order to do what's best for your children. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to love your kids so much, that you love your kids so much that you're willing to remove your ego from the equation. See, here's what I mean by this. When you equate your job as a mom or your job as a dad with your self-worth as a person, you're never, ever going to be able to see a different perspective. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to preserve the status quo in order to preserve your self-worth. So here's what I mean. If you can come to the realization that your child might be sick because of what you're doing as a parent, that will be good news, because it gives you the power to be able to change. See, if we just blame everything on bad genes, on bad germs, on bad teachers, on bad coaches, what that does is that's going to leave you powerless to change. Now, it may make you feel better, but think of this. If you're not willing to look inside and say, gosh, maybe I've been doing something wrong, maybe I haven't been doing the right things for my kids, if you're never willing to look inside and be able to ask that question, it's never going to give you the ability or the power to be able to change. So our jobs as parents is really this. Our jobs as parents is not for our kids to protect them so that they can skate through life injury-free, sickness-free, or trial-free. But it's actually our job as parents is to help give them healthy and safe exposures so that they can learn, they can adapt, they can become independent, and they can make the right choices for themselves. So our job as parents is, as soon as they're born, to train them and teach them how to become independent so that they don't need us. So today I'm going to give you a very, very different perspective, and hopefully when you see a different perspective, you will actually be able to start answering your own questions. So I know that we asked a lot of the moms, a lot of the dads, and they gave us questions. And so instead of answering all those questions and you have to learn a bunch of rules and a bunch of lists, what I want you to do instead is I want you to get a different perspective. I want you to get a big idea about something, because when you have an understanding of the big idea about your child, about raising them, about drugs, about the immune system and things like that, you'll actually be able to start answering your own questions. But I want to start off with this, and I actually talk about this in our book that we wrote, Transformation 28. And it's the story of the Christmas ham. And if you've never heard this story before, make sure you give us a thumbs up, because it's one of my favorite stories, but it's going to prove a point. So a young girl was watching her mother prepare the Christmas ham. And before her mother put the ham in the oven, the mom cut the ends off of both of the ham. So the little girl was intrigued. So she said, "Mom, why did you cut the ends off of the ham?" And the mom said, "Well, you know what? I don't know, darling. your grandmother always did it. Why don't you go ask her? So the young girl went into the other room and she asked her grandmother. She said, Grandma, why did you cut the ends off the Christmas ham? And her grandmother said, well, you know what? I don't know. It's what your great grandmother always did. And then after dinner, the family got in their car and then they went to visit great grandma at the nursing home. And while they were visiting, the young girl asked for a third time, said, Great grandma, why did you cut the ends off of the Christmas ham? And great grandma said, well, back in my day, our oven was so small, I had to cut the ends off so that the ham would fit inside the oven. See, here's what the moral of the story is do you do things just because everyone else does? Or are you actually thinking for yourself, and are you actually doing what makes sense? So it almost seems like we, at some point in our lives, we just decide that we are going to stop learning, we're going to stop growing, and we're going to stop thinking. And then we just decide we're going to shut our brains off at a certain age and just let other people tell us what to do. So for our kids, we have to stop being intellectually lazy. We have to always be learning, because obviously what we want is what we want the best for our kids. And I imagine there's probably a lot of things that don't make sense to you that people tell you what to do when it comes to your kids. And you probably even question yourself saying, well, I guess some of the people who know more than me are telling me to do it, so I guess I'm supposed to do it. See, because a lot of times what happens is people will say, but my doctor said, or my pediatrician said, or but this person said. And we start to get emotional about, what their doctor said because, well, they're obviously an expert. But I'm going to tell you something. A medical doctor is not an expert in health. They're an expert in diagnosing and giving a chemical in order to suppress symptoms. See, this is the result. Doing today what your doctor said. If you do exactly what your doctor said, the result is this. 1 in 3 kids now. So of the kids in grade school, and this is a conservative estimate, 1 in 3 are going to get diabetes, type 2 diabetes. Kids under 12, 1 in 7 already have 3 or more risk factors for having heart disease. 51% of people in the United States have at least one allergy. So they have some kind of like seasonal allergy. 1 in 4 children take a medication for a chronic illness. And 52% of people in the United States, that's everyone, take a medication for a chronic illness. 7 to 8 million kids are on psychotropic drugs, specifically for depression, anxiety, or for ADHD. 1 in 68 children have autism now, and that's 1 in 42 boys, and that's also a conservative number. And even when you think of autism costs in the United States are $236 billion is spent on taking care of kids with autism. And the lifetime out-of-pocket cost for those parents is $1.4 million. And for those kids with autism, 80% of those families end in divorce. And here's the interesting thing when it comes to autism is that, see, you have to understand that medical doctors they say that everything is settled. Science is settled. And science is never settled. Because once you say science is settled, then it's actually a contradiction of science. Because science is always about learning. So here's what they say about autism, for example. Well, it's definitely environmental, but we know it's definitely, we don't know what it is. And you can see if you start thinking the contradiction in that. So they're saying we don't know what it is, but we definitely know that there is no link to vaccines when it comes to autism. So you see how that alone doesn't make sense. So the thing is we are cutting the ends off of the Christmas ham. We have no idea why, but we just keep doing it because that's just what people are actually saying. So I want to give you a different perspective, and here's what the perspective is. I want you to ask this question. Here's the question. What if? So start thinking differently. What if my child's body doesn't make mistakes? What if my child's body doesn't make mistakes? What if my child's body is only trying to adapt to stressors? So I want you to think about that, because think of this. Now you're going to start looking at fevers. Now you're going to start looking at illness. Now you're going to start looking at rashes. Now you're going to start looking at all of these different illnesses. You'll start looking at it differently. Because if the body doesn't make a mistake, then what is then the purpose of a fever? So then obviously there has to be a reason by the body for actually having a fever. So write that question down. What if my child's body doesn't make a mistake? What if everything that's happening inside the body is them trying to adapt to specific stressors? So here's our job as parents. Our job as parents, remember we said it's trying to adapt. And our job as parents is to not to wrap them in bubble wrap and shrink wrap and protect them from everything. Our job as parents is actually to facilitate healthy adaptation. You know, if you notice that everyone today says that kids are sicker, they're softer, they're more fragile and physically, mentally, and emotionally than ever before. And it's no wonder, because parents today are trying to protect their children from every single trauma, from every single germ, and from every single psychological hurt. But here's the thing for your kids, they're either adapting and getting stronger, or they're not adapting and they're getting sicker. So our job is not to protect them from everything, but it's to expose them in an environment to allow them to be able to grow and to adapt that we can control as a parent. So when you look at adaptation, especially in kids, kids are trying to adapt to stressors. And so when you look at the different kinds of stressors, you have physical stressors, you have chemical stressors, there's mental stressors. And all of these three things play together between the immune system, between the digestive system, between the nerve system, and all of those things, those different organ systems are always trying to adapt in the best way possible. And when a child gets sick, or when they have some kind of injury, or when those things happen, it means that the amount of stress that those different stressors that they're presented with are too much for their body to be able to handle. And so what happens is that the body then begins to try to adapt to those stressors. So how do you facilitate healthy adaptation? Well, children need stressors, but they also need controlled stressors. So let's talk about where kids are getting these different kind of stressors. Here's the first one. So we talked about physical stressors. Physical stressors. So when we talk about physical stressors or physical inflammation taking place inside the body, really what we're talking about is we're talking about specific physical stressors that take place on the spine in relation to the nerve system. See, guys, when you look at the spine, the whole purpose of the spine is protection of the nerve system, and the purpose of the nerve system is adaptation inside of the body. So here's what's so interesting. When you look at neurology, your nerve system is always trying to keep your child within this balance. So you have one division of your nerve system, which is called the parasympathetic nerve system. And this part of the nerve system is everything involved with rest and digest. So calming things down. And when things are in a calm state, this is where you stimulate saliva. Your heartbeat starts to go down. You stimulate activity of your stomach. You stimulate your gallbladder. You stimulate the activity of the intestines. So in this state is where you're in this calm state, and you have the ability to be able to digest food, for example. Now, if you look at so many people who have reflux or they have some kind of digestive issues, this is actually part of the nerve system that's not working very well because they don't have the ability to calm down those organs to be able to digest food. So if you can't digest food, you can't absorb food. And if you can't absorb food, how on earth are you going to make and rebuild the body and repair the body, or even have a healthy immune system? This is particularly true when you look at kids who, for some reason, they develop perfectly for 9 months, and then as soon as they come out of the womb, now they're having problems with reflux. And that's not supposed to be that way. Then you look at the other part, and this is where probably you as a parent, where we would call them sympathetic dominant. So when you're sympathetic dominant, you're always in this state of fight or flight. So your heartbeat goes up. You don't digest your food. You don't produce stomach acid. And this is where digestion slows down. But most people today, and a lot of kids today, are going to have an imbalance between these two divisions of the nerve system. And I'm going to show you actually how this happens. Because people say, well, how on earth did my child have any kind of damage to my nerve system? And here's the first one right here. Guys, these are also called normal births. So here, when you look at the birth process, this is going to be the #1 trauma that's going to cause a physical stressor in children. And here's the thing. In the United States, we have the highest amount of birth intervention than any other country. And we also have, as far as any kind of industrialized countries, we also have one of the highest rates of infant mortality. So let me ask you a question. Do you think that these normal births, do you think that they can cause any kind of trauma to the upper part of the spine? And remember, what does that neurology control? Rest and digest. So these nerves are the ones that are affecting the parasympathetic nerve system. And this is responsible for having a healthy digestive system, #1, but it's also linked to having a healthy immune system, which I'm going to talk about in just a second. And this is why a child will come out of the womb and immediately have things like colic, GERD, or think about this, even asthma. And in fact, when a doctor uses any kind of obstetric procedure, this one right here is considered a C-section. This is a forceps, which is going to have the most amount of trauma, and this is a vacuum extraction, that the incidence of asthma went up 38% in the first year of life, 32% in the first year of life, and when you had the most amount of trauma to the upper part of the neck, 112% increase in asthma. Now, yes, there are times where these things are absolutely needed, like a breech baby sometime where the baby won't turn, placenta previa, things like that. And thank God for those things. But what happens when someone has that procedure? What are you doing in order to start fixing it? So a lot of times people ask me, they say, well, why are there so many birth interventions now? It was actually 32, a third of all births in 2017 were cesarean section. The reason why this is a problem is because in order for your child's microbiome, or the healthy gut bacteria that colonize in the large intestine, in order for that to be able to colonize, that actually needs, the baby needs to go through the vaginal canal in order to get introduced to specific bacteria. So people say, well, why on earth are 32% of kids having C-sections? And I'll be very honest with you. #1, it's because of convenience. And #2, it's also because of reimbursement. Because having a C-section, the doctor will get reimbursed approximately 4 to 5 times more than if it was just a natural delivery. So then you have birth trauma, but then you think about this, as soon as our kids are 5 years of age, now what happens is a lot of kids are sedentary, or they're spending 4 or 5 or 6 hours every single day sitting at a desk, looking down at an iPad or looking down at a laptop or playing video games, and putting themselves in completely the opposite position that's needed for there to not be any kind of tension on the spinal cord that can actually cause this sympathetic dominance, which will shut down the immune system and shut down the digestive system. So how many hours a day is your kid spending in this position? And how many times when you look at the kids going to school, do they have 38 pounds strapped to their back that's forcing their spine into the granny posture? And guys, when you force yourself into this position, what happens is the spine will get stuck in that position, and that will cause an imbalance between rest and digest and fight or flight. And this is not a novel concept, because if you look at this picture, and you can actually look this up on the internet, but this is a model that scientists made based on today what the average office worker is going to look like in 20 years. Because of their sedentary lifestyle, because we do nothing in order to take care of our spine and nerve system, and because we're actually sitting all the time. So what you see is a giant forward head. You see how this actually affects body composition. It affects vascular supply going down into the legs. And so I don't know about you, but I don't want my daughter to actually look like that. But that is the trend of what people are looking like, because we don't take care of these things. And on top of that, we're putting ourselves habitually into these positions all the time. So guys, when you x-ray this, and we will x-ray kids in the office, because to not get test is to guess. To see is to be able to know. And so when you look at a normal x-ray of a child from the side, this would be their eyes, here's their teeth, here's the back of the head. And in a normal position, there should be this normal curve. So when there is a normal curve, there is no tension, no damage taking place in through the spinal cord, because the spinal cord should be curved and it runs down right between these two parts of the bone. So when we x-ray people, we compare, so where are they at with the black line, where are they at with the red line, and these two lines should come as close as possible. Now, when you look at this, this is actually not a normal x-ray, and the reason why I'm showing you this is because this is an example of birth trauma, because this is this girl's corrected x-ray. This one was her first one. So when you look at this, you can see that this right here is her position when she started, and this is the position to where we were able to go. But here's what's interesting, is that she had issues with her brain. She had a lowered immune system. She had a problem with her hormones. She had problems with her digestive system. And she also had learning difficulties. So here was her first x-ray. And then when we actually worked on getting this corrected, here's what's interesting. Digestion got better. Hormone got better. Menstrual cycle got better. Digestive issues got better, but she also didn't have any learning difficulties. And you might say, well, why on earth, how on earth could that happen? Because guys, your child's, most of your brain stimulation is actually happening through movement of your spine. And when the spine can't move the way that it's supposed to, it can't feed the neurons within the brain. So this is why having proper motion within the neck, specifically in the pelvis, why it's so important for proper brain stimulation. And we have had kid after kid after kid whose grades went up only because we started giving them proper brain stimulation, and we started putting their spines back in a normal position, and then their nerve systems actually started to get better. So here's my first question for you. If you're listening right now, has your child's posture been checked? And if not, let me ask you a question. When would be the best time to do that? And I'll say, if they're 10 years old, the best time would have been 10 years ago. But you know, the next best time is right now. So let's talk about chemical stressors now. So guys, when you look at chemicals, because everyone is concerned about toxicity, everyone is concerned about, you know, chemicals, and I understand that, I get that, and you should be concerned, rightly so. But when you're understanding chemical stressors, or how biochemistry works inside the body, there is literally trillions of biochemical processes taking place in your child right now, every single second as we speak. So in order for biochemical processes, and this might be the production of energy, the production of hormones, the production of production of immune system cells, whatever it might be, here's how it works inside of the body. So first thing that you need is you need some kind of constituent. So you need the raw materials. So here you have raw material A, but it needs to get converted into another material into B. And then finally it goes into C. But where you see these arrows, what you need in order to convert these things over are things like enzymes, you need vitamins, you need minerals, you need carbs, you need fats, you need proteins in order for that to take place. So when all of that is sufficient, A can get turned into B, then can get turned into C. But here's what happens, is that when you don't have enough vitamins, minerals, or fats or carbohydrates, proteins, enzymes, things like that, then what happens is that you may have A, it may get converted into B, but because of some kind of toxicity that might be damaging the enzyme system, or you might have some kind of efficiency, now what happens is that you can't produce enough C. And that's going to be due to either a toxicity or some kind of deficiency. And this is why when you're talking about chemical stressors, this is why nutrition actually is so important. because what you're doing with nutrition is you're giving the body what it needs for those biochemical processes that will always happen. You don't have to think about them because they're just a law. They'll always happen. So you just have to give the body the right constituents in order to make proper hormones, in order to make proper immune system cells and things like that. So let me ask you guys some questions. Because remember I said, I want you guys to start talking differently, okay? So start thinking differently. And if you really just, the first question to knowing what to do is just really start asking the right questions. So how many of you ever asked yourself this question? Because I started asking this question back when I was like a teenager. Because when I was a teenager, I was sick all of the time. I had more sickness, more digestive issues than it seemed than the other people that I was around, more asthma, things like that. I remember I would ask my mom this question. I said, Mom, like, why am I more sick? Why do I have more injuries? Why am I on more antibiotics? Why do I have digestive system? And the answer was, I don't know. It's probably just genetic, you know. But I want you to think of this. Think of this. Remember, if the body is never making a mistake, it's only trying to adapt. It's never making a mistake. It's always trying to adapt. That the body is always trying to heal, that it's never going to do anything that's going to hurt you. So it's always trying to heal as best as possible. Genetically programmed. You were genetically programmed to heal and to live as long as possible. So here's the first question. So I know that in what I think American Samoa right now, there's this whole measles outbreak that's taking place. And by the way, if you actually really look at it, you will see that they started to introduce a vaccine back in October. And now you actually see the measles outbreak. And the reason why is because the actual measles vaccine has a live virus that you can shed for up to 2 weeks after you get the virus. So think about this. Because when you look at the mortality rate of measles or mumps, polio, chickenpox, that the mortality rate, depending on which one you're looking at, the mortality rate, number of people who die from that infection, will range from anywhere between 1 in 5,000 to like 1 in 700 or 800. And that's the mortality rate. Someone dies from that infection. So I want you to think about it. Why did that person die, but the other 999 lived and were actually healthier for getting that infection? Now, if the body doesn't make mistakes, then why are there fevers? There's a purpose for a fever. See, the thing with fevers is that the body, in its infinite wisdom, is going to actually raise the body temperature in order to speed up the metabolism of the immune system. So as you speed the temperature up, it means that the body is increasing the biochemistry in order to help produce more immune system cells. Think of this, is that a bacteria and a virus can live and thrive at 98.6 degrees. But a bacteria can't live at 104. A virus can't live at 101. So now when you think of this, what happens when your child has a fever at 99 to 100, 101, and it stays around there for 5, 6, 7 days? What do you think that they're trying to kill off? They're trying to kill off a virus. What if your child quickly spikes up to 104 degrees? What kind of infection do you think they have? They're going to have a bacterial infection. And I know that people say, well, aren't they going to have, aren't fevers dangerous? Fevers are not dangerous. So no one dies from a fever. They die from the infection. But here's the thing. Then what was wrong with their immune system that they couldn't handle the infection? Think of this, because someone had asked the question, do I need to wipe down the grocery cart? Because don't we give hand sanitizer and wipe things down, and we try to make it as sterile as possible? But I want you to think of this. If germs were so bad, then why do we have 100 trillion of them living inside of us, including staph, strep, and E. coli? You guys want to know something? Is that E. coli and Escherichia coli, which everyone has these E. coli outbreak scares, is that E. coli is normal bacteria that lives in your intestines. Staph, I have a staph infection, that is normal flora that lives on your skin. Or what about I have a strep infection? Strep is normal. It lives inside of your intestines. Well, then, Dr. Nate, why do I get a strep infection? I'm glad that you asked. Reason why your child gets a strep infection is because the normal bacteria are just merely overgrowing inside. So it's really just a bacterial overgrowth because the conditions are right for it. And the two biggest things that can cause an overgrowth of some kind of bacteria are going to be the immune system gets suppressed, because the immune system is always keeping that bacteria that lives within the body, they're always keeping it under bay. And the reason why is because that bacteria is actually beneficial. So as long as the immune system is keeping it at the right amount, that bacteria is actually giving you nutrients, it's helping you to produce certain things, and it's doing all of these amazing functions. But when the immune system gets suppressed, those bacteria starts to grow. Now, think of this. If scurvy and rickets, you guys know what scurvy and rickets are. If you don't, look it up. If they can be cured with adequate nutrition, then why can't common infections be, quote unquote, cured with an adequate immune system response? So those are questions that you have to start asking yourself. So let's talk about your child's immune system and how it relates to chemical stressors. So your child's work system is either working or deficient, and it's always learning. So you know how people will say, well, you can boost your immune system 1,000%. Your immune system can only function at 100%. It can't function anything better than that. However, it can function less than 100%. And here's the amazing thing about your immune system. When your child is born, that immune system immediately starts to learn, almost like a computer program. You know those computer programs that the more you enter data in, the more it learns, and the quicker it will start to respond. And when you look at your health, you look at your child's health, really what it is a dance between your immune system and your normal flora, because bacteria and viruses are everywhere inside of your body. So they're there to help you digest your food. They help to produce the nutrients. And they even actually are training the immune system on how to identify cancer cells. So the whole reason why we have bacteria that live inside our bodies is someone put it into a really interesting perspective. They said this, think about this. Once a person dies, if nothing is done, you understand that within 7 days, they immediately are starting to rot from the inside out. And the reason why is that once we die, the immune system ceases to exist, and then the bacteria start to grow. So I want you to think about that. So that bacteria only grows when there is no immune system response, or there is not enough immune system response. Now, here's the other thing too. You never develop an immunity to anything. Well, what do you mean, Dr. Nate? I had chickenpox when I was young, and I don't have chickenpox any longer. You never can develop immunity. There's no such thing. The only thing that you develop is you develop a faster response. Because I want you to think about this. What would happen? What happens, for example, when someone who has been exposed to chickenpox, when their immune system gets very low? Guess what those people actually get? It's called shingles. Think of herpes, the gift that keeps on giving. Some people get a herpes infection and they only become carriers. But think of this. Those people who are carriers, what happens when their immune system gets low? So when their immune system gets low, they get cold sores or they get genital infections and things like that. So specifically with viruses, is that once you're exposed to a virus, that virus is within your body forever, and the immune system is always keeping it under wraps, under bay, unless the immune system starts to get low. Now think of this one. Antibodies, okay? So I want you to write this one down. Your child does not create antibodies called IgG, IgA, IgM, IgE, IgD. And by the way, did you know that they didn't even discover IgD antibodies until 1995? So when they say we know everything about the body, they don't, because there's so much more that we still haven't learned. And that's why we always say that we always work with the body and not against it. So children don't even create antibodies to identify pathogens until 3 to 4 months of age. And this includes bacteria, viruses, and pay attention to this, and food. So if a child 3 to 4 months, by the time they're 0 to 3 to 4 months of age, if they don't have the ability to create antibodies to identify pathogens, where do you think the primary place they're supposed to get antibodies from then is? It's actually coming from breast milk. And that's why you have to breastfeed. So if you guys have ever heard of leaky gut, give me a thumbs up, because I know a lot of people that leaky gut is almost a fashionable term for today. But leaky gut is another name for it. It's called intestinal hyperpermeability. And I'm going to talk about why this is so important with your kids, and why every child that's born has a leaky gut. So when you look at your digestive system going from the stomach and then into the duodenum and then into the small intestine, that small intestine lining, if you look at your skin has 5 to 6 layers of skin cells. So the skin is almost a protective hide. But when you look at your digestive system, because your digestive system inside of it is completely outside of the body's internal environment. And in fact, anything that you eat, as long as you have those barriers intact, really those things aren't even supposed to come into contact with the body's internal environment. So when you talk about leaky gut, there's only one cell that's differentiating between the outside environment and the body's internal environment. And you have one layer of cells that line the intestines. So in order for your child to be able to absorb food, there has to be those barriers that get established. So what happens is things like vitamins, things like minerals, things like carbohydrates broken down into sugars, proteins broken down into amino acids, fats broken down into fatty acid chains. They're supposed to be broken down as small as possible so that they can go through the cells and then end up in the blood. So here's what happens with so many people, is that you can have things that will start to break down this barrier. So things like antibiotics, things like Roundup, having chronic stress that we talked about. So not having that proper rest and digest response coming from damage happening to the nervous system. And in fact, what's interesting is if you look at a traumatic head and neck injuries, you will actually see that it will literally rip open the gut literally within minutes. And then any kind of infections, toxicity, medications like acetaminophen, pain relievers. So all of those things are going to break down the lining of the stomach. And when that lining starts to tear apart, then you're going to have all of these different things and pathogens, foods and things like that that are going to leak through. And then what happens is that you have an immune system response. So you have this huge immune system response because the immune system says that stuff is not supposed to be here. So then you start having reactions to food, problems with allergies, asthma, eczema. You'll have malabsorption of vitamins and minerals. And guys, when we are testing people, their foods for any kind of autoimmunity, or when we test people their foods who have autoimmunity, they always have massive amounts of food allergies. So here's the thing. Babies are born with a leaky gut. Babies are born with a leaky gut. Now you might be saying, oh my goodness, that's terrible. But think about this. The body never makes a mistake. So if babies are born with a leaky gut, and if the body doesn't make a mistake, why are babies born with a leaky gut? And I want you to think about that just for a second. And here's the answer. Babies are born with a leaky gut because in order for mom to pass on antibodies, in order to pass on immune system constituents, in order to pass on large carbohydrates and fats and proteins, in order for them to pass it on, that gut has to be wide open because they can't get through the digestive cells. So babies are supposed to have a leaky gut in order to receive mom's breast milk, in order to get antibodies and to help it fight off infections until they can actually start creating antibodies on their own. Now think of this. How long does that leaky gut last for? It lasts for a year. So when you go to your pediatrician and they say you need to introduce rice at 3 months, guess what happens? That rice carbohydrates, the rice proteins are ending up straight into the baby's bloodstream. And why do you think there are so many kids who are having problems with their immune system? Reason why is because they're not digesting it, and those proteins are just ending up straight in the blood, and now the immune system says, you don't belong here. I remember when my oldest was 3 or 4 months of age, and my wife comes to me and she says, yeah, Talon has a big patch of eczema on his shoulder. And I was like, well, he shouldn't. There's no way that he should have anything. We haven't exposed him to anything. I said, have you been doing anything different? And she says, well, the last couple of days, I introduced rice cereal to him. And I was like, oh my goodness, why did you give him rice cereal? She said, well, because that's what everyone does. But you have to understand the reason why he started to develop eczema was because he was having an immune system response to that actual rice. So guess what happened? We took him off of that, and guess what happened to his eczema? It went away in about 3 to 4 days. So when should you start to feed baby solids? I would say you don't even introduce solids until 1 year of age, okay? So how many children do you know have been given rice cereal, soy-based formula with corn syrup solids, formula with damaging fats, or wheat gluten before 12 to 15 months of age? And that is a lot of kids. So remember, just because everybody is doing it doesn't mean that you should do it, because this is causing so much immune system issues taking place. I want to give you an example. This is actually my son. So our kids, I've x-rayed them. Our kids, we've tested their foods. So this is my son. And in fact, if you look at his x-ray, you can see, this is an x-ray of him about 6 years of age, and you can see how bad his neck is. And I'm going to tell you something. My son, when he was born, had a vacuum extraction, and it caused, you can see, damage to the upper part of the neck. So out of my 12-year-old, 10-year-old, and 8-year-old, guess which one has had the most amount of ear infections or the most amount of food allergies? And he does. And in fact, we tested, this is his x-ray from him down and through his lower part of his spine. Here's his left hip, right hip. This has to be straight right here. So you can see it's pretty straight. But when you look at this and this, you can actually see that's the presence. Those black spots are the presence of inflammation taking place within the gastrointestinal system. So we actually tested my son's foods, and you can see that even my son, who's never been exposed to a drug or to an antibiotic ever, he has 23 different food allergies, and in fact, an extreme reaction to cheese, to cow's milk, and to wheat. So even for my son, no eggs, no dairy, gluten-free, and has to eat a very low amount of sugar. So let me ask you a question. Has your child's foods been tested? And if they haven't been tested, when would be the best time to do that? Now, typically, we don't test foods until about 3 or 4 years of age. But what about babies? So would you test babies' foods? And I say you don't test their foods if mom is breastfeeding. So if a baby is having issues and mom is breastfeeding, you would check mom's foods, because she would be passing antibodies onto them actually through the breast milk. So let's talk about chemicals as well. I did a live a little bit while ago about why I get so riled up about giving drugs and medications to children. So this was actually from MedSafe. This is kind of like the New Zealand PubMed of the United States. And here's actually what they found. So whenever there's some kind of toxin that is given to the body, there's an organ that is there that, as blood goes through it, is designed to inactivate and get rid of those toxins. And so that organ is the liver. And in order to inactivate toxins, in order to convert hormones, in order to produce bile, the liver does so many different functions. And a lot of times when we test people, people's livers are absolutely trashed. And it isn't because that you drank too much. Some of the biggest reasons why the liver is trashed is because of the amount of toxicity. Eating way too much sugar will cause fatty liver and things like that. So there's so many different reasons why people's livers aren't working, but here's what's interesting. Within those livers, you have different enzymatic pathways that's designed to inactivate toxins. So one of those pathways is an enzyme just called cytochrome P450-3A4. And in fact, when I am looking at people's hormones, how we know what's wrong with the hormones is because we know where these enzymes are involved in the pathways that are converting hormones. So this particular enzyme pathway, this is what's interesting. This pathway is responsible for the metabolism of more than 50% of medicines. Over 50% of your medications, this pathway is responsible for. Now think of this. This activity is absent in newborns, but reaches adult levels at around 1 year of age. The liver and the small intestines have the highest activity of this enzyme. Most of it's in the liver, some of it's in the small intestines. So you guys just think for a second, is that it's absent in newborns, but reaches adult levels at 1 year of age. So what do you think a child should really never be on? Is a medication before 1 year of age. And this is why doctors are scared to death to give you acetaminophen to a child, because they don't have, before 1 year of age, because they don't have the enzymatic pathways to be able to get rid of it. And this is why I am so scared to death when doctors are giving medications to children, because they don't have the ability to be able to clear certain medications out. Now think of this. Remember how we said that a child doesn't have the ability to clear out toxins, medications until 1 year of age. But within the first year, a child has already been exposed to aluminum, formaldehyde, propylene glycol, thimerosal, acetone, phenol, borax, and monkey kidney aborted fetal tissue remnants, infected animal cells, human blood, and infected human connective tissue. It's already been exposed to all of those different things before 1 year of age. And do you know what those constituents are? What are these the ingredients of? They are the ingredients of vaccines. And yet children don't have the ability to be able to clear those specific things out. They don't even have the enzymatic pathways before age 1 year of age. Yet when you look at from the CDC, this right here is the vaccine schedule, and look at all of the different vaccines that your child is supposed to get before 1 year of age. Now listen, this is not an anti-vax type of work alive. I don't want to turn that into that or go down that road. But people will ask me, do you vaccinate your kids? And I say, no, never. I never will. And the reason why is it because it really comes down to understanding the immune system and how vaccines don't even stimulate the right type of part of the immune system in order to have any kind of long-term immunity to anything. So if you can understand the immune system, and now you'll be able to know what you do in order to build your child's immune system up the way that it's supposed to. Remember how we said that there are so many kids who have such weakened immune system, chronic allergies, chronic asthma. They're getting sick all the time. Well, if you have a weak immune system as a child, if you're not doing anything different, you're going to have a weakened immune system as an adult. And a weakened immune system as adult does continue with allergies. It can continue with asthma. But really what it means is that you're going to have a higher cancer risk. Because yes, the immune system is even responsible for killing cancer cells every single day. So if you look at the immune system, there's two parts. You have your innate immune system, you have your adaptive immune system. So your innate immune system is what you're actually born with, and it's always on. So as soon as your child is born, your child is born with an innate immune system. So here you have different parts. So part of your immune system can be considered your skin, your mucous membranes, your digestive system, digestive enzymes, even your stomach pH. So think of this: rest and digest, fight or flight. If you are in fight or flight all the time, your stomach will not produce enough acid and you will not sterilize food. And if you are not sterilize food, any bacteria or pathogens that's in the food is going to end up within your small intestine. And if you have a very sick small intestine, that bacteria has the ability to go straight into your bloodstream. So here you have your skin, mucous membranes, specific digestive enzymes in your pancreas, normal stomach pH, and then having normal healthy bacteria within your colon. All of these things produce barriers. And in fact, when you look at the route of infection, how your child is supposed to get presented with an infection is that it's supposed to be either eaten or it's supposed to be breathed in. And once that happens, then the immune system response already starts within those barriers. So it's actually the first line of defense. Then you have your complement system, which is your chemical system, your chemical messenger system. And a lot of these complement proteins are made in the liver. And then you have things like neutrophils, macrophages, dendritic cells, and things like that. And they're responsible for killing the infection, usually as close as possible to the gastrointestinal system. And then what happens is it will take those infections and then it will actually start to present it to the adaptive immune system to start to make antibodies. This adaptive immune system, again, it doesn't start until 3 to 4 months of age. This is known as the delayed response. So once you have that immediate infection, this is why it can take 7 to 10 days for your child to overcome any kind of viral infection. It will take 7 to 10, sometimes 14 days in order for those white blood cells to start producing antibodies and for there to be enough T cell production to start killing those virally infected cells. And in fact, we can measure a person's immune system by doing a test known as CD8, CD4 test to measure how many of these cells they have inside of their body. And when people have cancer, this is very low. When people have autoimmunity, this is very low, because autoimmunity is usually a chronic viral infection that their immune system is so low that it can't overcome. So how do you work with this immune system? So let me talk to you about this. So much of your immune system cells are produced within the bone marrow. And if you ever heard of stem cells, where they're produced is within the bone marrow. So how do you increase stem cell production within the bone marrow to make healthy immune system cells? Here's the first thing: get your child adjusted. Really, Nate? Get your child adjusted, and here's why. The reason why is because the nerve system actually goes into the bone marrow, and the nerve system within the bone marrow influences how many white blood cells are made within the bone marrow. And in fact, research has actually shown after an adjustment that you'll see this burst of new white blood cell production and activity immediately following within the blood after a chiropractic adjustment. Well, why does that work so well? Because chiropractic puts your child in a state of parasympathetic or rest and digest, which allows the immune system to function the way that it's supposed to. We use a lot of herbs in the office and a lot of them that have been used for thousands of years. And in fact, every single one of the different types of herbs that we use, all you have to do is go on to PubMed, which is the national database of all research articles, and you will actually see more articles on PubMed about the benefit of herbs and the immune system than you will about the actual drugs that do the exact same thing, but now produce side effects. So astragalus, when people need a lot of stem cells in order to start boosting that immune system, astragalus will do it at the level of the bone marrow. Now, when you look at the innate immune system, things like reishi mushrooms, echinacea, and actually elderberry will improve the innate immune system. So by innate immune system, We're talking about those immediate white blood cells that help to fight the infection initially. So a lot of you probably have used elderberry on your child, and elderberry is great. Echinacea is great too, and reishi mushrooms are some of the best things you can do in order to improve the innate immune system. So, and in fact, we actually just recently have gotten elderberry in. The elderberry that we use actually includes honeysuckle, lemon peels, and then also reishi mushrooms are already in it, okay? So that is giving the food for the immune system cells to actually work. But what's also interesting, though, is in order for you to have a healthy innate immune system, or the innate immune system, people always forget that really what's more important than that is for them to have healthy barriers. So how do you increase healthy barriers? Well, for some people, we have to rebuild their stomach. We have to actually increase the stomach acidity. But if you've ever heard about probiotics and how probiotics actually help the immune system, well, the reason why is because things like chamomile and probiotics will help to increase those barriers. So a lot of people say, well, I take probiotics and they're great for me. And I only give probiotics maybe about 25% of the time. And the reason why is this: probiotics will not work unless your child has a healthy mucus barrier within the large intestine. So if they don't have that mucus layer, that's where the bacteria live. So you can give probiotics until the cows come home and they'll never grow because they don't have the right environment for them to grow. So some of the things that can help with production of that mucus barrier is actually called chamomile. So if you ever heard of chamomile tea is very relaxing, but actually chamomile is very stimulatory to the body. It produces mucus, especially within the large intestine, so that mucus formation takes place. That's when probiotics will actually help. And then when you look at the increasing neutrophils, things like that, you also have Albizia. Now we give Albizia to a lot of people who have a lot of food allergies and who have chronic things like allergies and asthma, because what Albizia does is it helps to modulate the immune system response, because those people who have allergies or have asthma, their immune system is actually hypersensitive to everything. So the herb Albizia will help modulate that. And then if you look at the adaptive immune system, because now you're going into antibodies, and this is really geared more towards like autoimmunity and chronic viral infections and things like that. But for those people, Astragalus, Romania, not the country, it's called Romania. But then this is where even a chiropractic adjustment will help with increasing your killer T cell formation. Vitamin D3 will help, and also chaga mushrooms will help as well. So this is like when people say, well, I did vitamin D and it didn't work. And the reason why is because vitamin D influences just one part of that immune system. And this is how we can actually identify when we're doing testing why you don't have to take all of these different things, but you should always get adjusted. But we can do things in order to help with, to help us specifically like the viral response. So for example, if someone is battling the flu, we adjust those people like crazy. We give them high dose of Astragalus, Romania, chaga mushrooms, vitamin D specifically in order to help those specific pathways. And then finally, one of the things that as parents, you probably should just have on hand all the time is, I would say, colloidal silver. And so what happens if your child is in emergency and they have gotten sick? One of the things that you can do is give your child colloidal silver. And so you can give colloidal silver orally. You can actually do colloidal silver as a nasal spray. But one of the things that colloidal silver will actually do, you can actually put it on as a lotion on the skin. But one of the things that it will do is that it will help to break down bacteria, and it'll help to break down the virus. So consider it an antibiotic with all of the side effects of having the antibiotic, so that it decreases that load so that the immune system can actually start to catch up. So if you guys are watching this from out of town where you can't come into the office, just go ahead and write this down, store.thewellnessway.com. And then if you use code 5058, you can actually order some of that stuff. So rather than coming into the office, you can actually order online and have it shipped directly to your house. So some of the things you cannot order, especially the herbs, unless you have the code 5058. But then everything else, things like the vitamin D, mushrooms, elderberry, you don't need a code for those, but medicinal for the herbs, you're going to need a code for that. So how do you know what you need? Is that it's all about testing and it's not about guessing, all right? So I can't literally answer like a million different questions, but what I can do is hopefully you're starting to think a little bit differently. So, but I imagine probably a lot of you would ask, well, Dr. Nate, what do you do for colic, right? Here's colic. First thing that you have to do is you have to look to see if there's any kind of birth trauma and see if there's been any kind of damage in the upper part of the neck. And if you start clearing that out and the mom still or the baby's still having some issues, the next thing that we're going to move to is that if mom is breastfeeding, we actually do a food test on mom to see if she is passing on those antibodies that is causing issues with the baby, okay? The other thing is too, is if they're a C-section baby, if they didn't pass through the vaginal canal, excuse me, is they're not going to get that introduction of probiotics into the large intestine. So a lot of times we will start to introduce probiotics either within in the breast milk or on the nipple in order to still help to populate a healthy microbiome. Dr. Nate, what do you do for ear infections? Well, listen, ear infections are usually viral. They're not bacterial. 95% are viral, which an antibiotic will do nothing for. But you want to figure out why they're having the ear infection. So the first thing is we adjust those kids because the neurology that goes into the ear actually comes from the upper part of the neck. And in fact, when your child has an ear infection, all you do is if you touch these areas right in through the ear, you'll see that they're in spasm and they're rock hard. And that's where that neurology goes. So for our kids, when we have ear infections, first thing that we do is adjust. And the longest an ear infection our kids have ever had has been about 3 hours. But the other thing is too, is you want to figure out if they keep getting ear infections. A lot of it can be due to food allergies as well. What do you do for fever? The thing that I do for fever is I adjust my kids and I let it run its course because the fever is actually the cure. So we don't do anything. There's no children that die from a fever. It can have even a high fever like a febrile seizure. And if your child has a febrile seizure, those are benign. There's no complications from it. In fact, I remember that we had a child come in, we adjusted him and immediately went into a febrile seizure because his fever went from 105 down to 99 in about 10 minutes. And so that's actually the nerve system resetting itself after the fever starts to go down rapidly. Dr. Nate, what do you do for vaccines? Never had them for our kids. In Illinois, there's religious and medical exemptions. Good luck getting a medical exemption. But in Illinois, there still is religious exemptions. And so you can go the religious route. You don't have to prove that you're religious or anything like that. But I will tell you that this liberty is slowly being eroded away. And I think that if things continue to go down the same path, I really believe that you are not going to be able to have any exemptions whatsoever. And I think if it continues going this trend, that you're not going to be able to fly or even get a driver's license until you are getting all of the quote unquote recommended vaccines that have actually never been studied for long-term consequences. And also they stimulate the wrong type of immune system response. So what do you do for allergies and eczema? Guys, this is a hyper immune system response. So you have to balance out the sympathetic and parasympathetic nerve systems. And then you have to look at food allergies and you have to look at the gut. And you start doing those things. I was an asthmatic for 15 years before I started doing some of these things. And I haven't taken asthma medication in 20 years. What about eczema? What about acne? You want to look at inflammation of the gastrointestinal system. You want to look at food allergies. You want to think about meds for acne. So medications for acne, really all they are is they're either an antibiotic, an anti-inflammatory, and high doses of synthetic vitamin A. And so your child has acne, look at the gut, but why don't you give them real vitamin A instead of giving them synthetic vitamin A? What do you do for a picky eater? This is tough because if you start them off on the wrong foot, then it becomes tough. I will tell you this. What do you do for a picky eater? Just think of this. Who's the parent? So they're not going to die from starvation. Eventually they'll eat something, But I will say that if you do start them off on the wrong foot, it is very difficult to change, because even to this day, I ate horribly. And to this day, I still love Twinkies, Ho-Hos, Mountain Dews, and Coke. So there's this emotional attachment to it because that's what I grew up on. So my kids, they don't like candy. They don't like those things because we just didn't introduce it to them. And my kids, so that they don't feel like losers at parties, we have them drink Zevia instead. But they don't really, so that they feel like, they don't feel left out. But our kids, except for our oldest, our kids don't even care about pop or anything like that. What do you do for sports? What do you do for travel sports? And I think this: teach your kids how to be an athlete first before you teach them to specialize. There's a lot of people out there, a lot of wolves out there that are trying to pressure you into getting your kids into a travel sport that is, they're not physically mature enough in order to specialize in. And also there's not enough recovery for them to be able to recover. So my kids do not play travel sports. We're teaching them how to become athletic first. And then if they want to specialize after that, we won't have them specialize until they're 13 or 14 years of age. So what do you do for exercise for your kids because they don't want to exercise? I would say this: be the example. So my kids do like to exercise, and the reason why is because they see mom and dad exercising. So your kids want to be just like you, good or bad. They want to be just like you. So if they want to be just like you, you're the one who's going to need to do specific things in order for them to follow and to mimic. And last thing is hormone and menstrual issues. Guys, I've seen so many young girls come in with hormone and menstrual issues, and the doctor gives them birth control for it, and which is one of the worst things that you can do. And here's the reason why. The reason why is if you have hormone and menstrual issues, there is some kind of significant hormone issue that is actually being caused either by stress, the gastrointestinal system, the spine, or even from the liver. And that the doctor, rather than fix that, goes in and creates another hormone imbalance by giving birth control. So what the biggest thing is that when it comes to testing their hormones, I believe that all women, all girls, as soon as they hit their first menstrual cycle, that you actually should test their hormones with a Dutch test, which is a dried urine total comprehensive hormone panel. That way you can see if there's any kind of hormone issues, and you can fix it before it turns into infertility, before it turns into breast cancer, before it turns into uterine cancer or ovarian cancer. Because in order for cancers to take place, you have to have a massive hormone dysfunction taking place first. So fix it before it turns into some kind of disease. All right. So guys, I know that we are going to have probably a couple of questions. We have about maybe 10 minutes or so to be able to answer those questions. But here's what's next. If you guys are listening to this right now, and you haven't gotten your child checked, you haven't gotten x-rays, you haven't tested their foods, or your child has, I don't know, ADHD or massive food allergies, or they have tech snack, or they are having headaches, whatever it might be, when do you think the best time to get them checked would be? And so maybe it's even you. Maybe you're suffering as a mom, or you're suffering as a dad. So one of the things that we have here for being online, and this is going to be open to the first 5 people who call or who email, is we're going to be doing $450 of testing for $150. And that includes a review of any of your child's or yours past test results within the past year. So any medical testing, the consultation with me. And in fact, many times before someone even comes in as a new patient, I've already looked through their medical tests and spent an hour going over all of the different things that are going on. So we always appreciate if you can bring your paperwork in before you come in so I can take a look at that and know exactly what to do. But that'll include a consultation. That'll include an examination, needed x-rays, and then a review of findings with me. So we'll actually take a look at that as well. So if you're sick of doing things that aren't working, and you're sick of suffering with the same health problem for you or for your child, then that's what you need to do right now. And this is going to be open to the first 5 people who call or who email, no exceptions, because for this week only, we can only handle 5 people. in order to be able to take great care of them. So make sure that you call right now or email Chloe. I know that right now she's actually standing by. And there she is. There's Chloe. So make sure that you guys email her, and she'll be contacting you either through phone or she'll be answering your email to make sure that you guys get scheduled for that.